Words. It's all about words. What do we have here anyway? These strange, unusual words, such as me, he, my. Oh, that's it. That's how you say it. He, my. Wow. This is a he-my. So, what kind of he-my is it? Oh, yes. It's a ram he-my. Hope I'm saying that right. Ram. And what more do we know of this he-my? Well, it's a very, very large pickup truck. Although it's merely a half-ton. Yes. But wait, what's this? Aha! It's a Laramie. A Laramie.
Words. Just words.
Wow, I've got to sort all this out. Will you help me? So words and names are confusing when it comes to these vehicles because what was just purely Chrysler became Daimler Chrysler, became Fiat Chrysler, and it's now Stellantis. They've had a lot of owners, this particular company, over the last 20, 30 years. But the products themselves have not changed all that much. They've been very, very successful with the vehicle you see standing in front of me. Or sitting. How can you ever tell with a car? Is it standing? Is it sitting? It's immobile at the moment. But this is a 1500 Ram. Crew Cab. Laramie. GT. All these things in one package. Very interesting truck in that it is designed to be a family hauler and a trailer puller. And it has a lot of, one of the things that the Ram label has been very active at since its inception has been coming up with new and different ways to do things. Putting things on the truck that you can't get anywhere else. And this truck is no exception. It has some very interesting features that you will probably embrace. You may raise an eyebrow at? I don't know. Let's take a look at one thing right here, because this is one of the more interesting aspects of this to me. If we open the tailgate, which is dampened like they pretty much all are now, we have a very nice cargo area on this 5-foot 7-inch bed. But watch this. Here's where all the magic comes. You do this, and you can swing it open, a la Honda Ridgeline. And there used to be a station wagon back in the 60s, 70s that had an amazing tailgate that worked like a tailgate, worked like a side door, very similar to this in a lot of ways. But this gives you this way of approaching the truck where you can put stuff down directly on the bed and use it as a passenger style door, even though you're not going to be putting any passengers in there. And this little side can also open in that manner. It's interesting. We have tailgate wars going on, if you haven't noticed. General Motors is putting some, especially GMC trucks, it's basically making a tailgate that's a transformer that you can turn into a workbench. And There's a lot of different approaches to how you see that. A lot of the people I work with that have pickups like simplicity and like stuff that doesn't break. And they'll look at something like this, and the first thing that goes to their head is, well, that's going to rust in there, and then I'm going to have a problem. I'm not going to be able to use that. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Excuse me, but I believe it's a very innovative approach to a problem that really didn't exist. But automakers do that all the time, and it's the kind of feature that some people will think, God, I don't know how I got along without this. But there you go. So anyway, we have our we have our Crew Cab 1500. We have a variety of performance enhancements on this particular model, including the engine, which is a 5.7 liter V8 eTorque. And the eTorque is a, you will see in just a minute, is a great big thing. Looks like a, kind of looks like a supercharger. It's a belt-driven generator to provide some electric assistance. And it's not a true hybrid. They can kind of call it a hybrid, but it isn't really, because it just doesn't do enough in terms of propulsion or anything else. But it does smooth over things, and it definitely has, it's an asset to the drivetrain because it helps smooth, especially low-end torque. It increases low-end torque. But we should look into that right now because it's kind of interesting. Wow, let's see if we can sneak up on this thing while the mouth's open and see what we have. Ah, we have our Hemi, our 5.7 liter V8 Hemi engine. And see that big old thing right there? It looks like a supercharger. It's got a belt on it and everything. Well, that's your eTorque unit that helps boost low-end torque, obviously. It does it electrically, generates electrical power. And one of the things I love about this engine, if you come over to the passenger side of it, there it is. You can pretty much get to everything. And up here to the right, you'll see one of the world's longest radiator hoses. It runs from the radiator all the way to the water pump there, which is a big unit as well. But and this also has what they're calling airflow, ram airflow, which I just assume is a more direct pathway for air to get in to the fuel injection system and everything else. But if you have to work on this side of the engine, your day is made easier by all this excellent access. Oh, I bet you're wondering, how much power does it have? Well, this is 395 horsepower and 410 pounds of foot-pounds of torque in this particular engine. A little bit more than the non-eTorque version. But like I said, they're not after real raw power boosting with the eTorque. They're just using it for a variety of little things, including just smoothing out the whole torque curve, especially at lower RPMs. Because whenever you have electric power, it tends to start right up as far as almost 0 RPM all the way up. You have some torque there. So how this works, I don't know exactly. All I know is don't touch that. See, cautionary. Whenever you see your cautionary, do not touch that. Do not play with that. Do not spray it with water. Don't do any of those things. You have to be careful with these vehicles nowadays. They got all these things running there. Got wiring everywhere. Just be careful. All right, what else do we have on this thing? Well, if you will observe here, I have some cargo in the cargo area. This 5 feet 7 inch long cargo box, which has a spray-on bed liner that looks really durable. Really, really tough stuff. And then it also has this sliding rack on the side here, right here, and up there with these sliding cleats that you can tie stuff onto. Very, very nice to have. It's weird, you lower down the tailgate and the lights come on. That's good, I guess. And then we have, this is an option, but this is a factory option. These are the best things in the world. There we go. These particular soft tops, I don't know if you've noticed their incredible popularity, made by several different manufacturers actually, but the basic design is all the same. And these are so fantastic because you just roll them down like so. Whoa, yeah. And then you fasten it right underneath here, which I will not do because I'm leaving it open because I got volatile material back here, and it's a gas can right here. But it's nice, and I highly recommend people that are not going to be hauling stuff all the time, which is 99% of the people buy pickups these days here in these United States. Most of the time they're not hauling anything. It's just right. Is it secure? This particular one is fairly secure, but they make them that are not made out of this soft material, but rather like a much, much tougher plastic. And it would offer a degree of protection from thieves, but only so much. But one thing that's always fascinating to me too is the depth from here to here. Now, for example, the deepest pickup bed for a long time was the Ford's, but the GM was only slightly less deep, and then with redesigns on these on these Rams, they have also gotten a little bit shallower, but not bad. I mean, it's still plenty deep enough. And the new Tundra is also like that. It's a little bit shallower, but not by all that much. But that's an interesting choice because it begs to how hard it is to reach out. Let me show you this. I'll simulate. Oh man, I can't get in there. Oh. But it's a choice that's made by what they think is the optimal depth of the bed. And this is pretty good. I have to say, this is a real good size. I think it's a good compromise between being low enough so that you can reasonably get over the side and high enough to keep stuff secure inside. So, feast your eyes, if you will, on the non-lift spring rear suspension on the Ram 1500. So on the 1500 series, Ram has years ago abandoned, I tell you, leaf springs instead for basically a multi-link coil setup. Now on this particular unit here, we have air springs, which is nice. But as you can see, you got your panhard rod and everything else here. Here's the thing to me. The quality of the ride is good. A lot of people think it's much better than with leaf springs. Personally, I think it's much different. Not necessarily better. But the thing about it that gets me, honestly, is it's so much more complicated than the old leaf spring suspension. Because you have all these additional parts, you see. You got all these links everywhere. You got these lower links here that attach. That's these guys here that attach to the lower part of the axle. And then on top, there we go. Can you see that there? It's right there. That's your upper links. And you have one of these on each side to locate the rear axle, because you no longer have the longitudinal bracing that you get if you had a leaf spring up in here. So this is very similar to the system that we have on the new Toyota Tundra. Has a very similar system, but naturally done their own way. And you got this anti-sway bar, which most of the pickups that have leaf springs don't have that necessarily. It helps, but it's not as mandatory. It seems to be completely mandatory on this kind of a setup. As far as weight capacity and everything else, it's, you know, pretty much exactly the same. But My question is all the additional complexity better? Is the ride quality substantially better enough to justify all this this additional complexity as opposed to leaf springs? I'm not convinced that it is. I think, and for a production cost standpoint, when they're building the truck, it's much simpler to put in leaf springs. And leaf springs themselves have improved dramatically over the last decade or so because they make them out of all kinds of different materials. So, but yeah, I mean, it works. It's fine. It's great. And in certain situations like bumpy corners, fairly lightly loaded, you're not going to notice. Well, you're going to notice a little bit of a difference. It does ride smoother and seems to be a little better under control. The rear axle doesn't hop around it as much, but I'm not convinced it's that much better. But that's the way it is. Will the other guys, including General Motors and Ford, eventually go over to coils? Good question. I don't know. I really don't know, because they could continue to improve leaf springs, and you're completely happy and satisfied. So interesting, isn't it, that we've come this far and actually gone backwards? The people that, if you go back in the early 70s, the old Chevrolet, I don't even know if it was called the Silverado back then, but the C10, the original half-ton truck, did have coil springs instead of leaves on the back of it, amazingly enough, with these massive locating arms. Much bigger than the smaller locating arms that are here. They were just huge, these girder things. And General Motors got rid of that after a few years because they didn't think it was satisfactory. And if you go to larger trucks, 3/4 ton trucks, that really have the high payloads and everything else, they don't have coil springs. Even on the Rams, they have leaf springs. Or as one ton dually I drove not too awfully long ago, it had air springs and leaf springs, and was unloaded, was the roughest riding truck I've ever driven in my entire life. And this includes a 1972 International Harvester 1 ton that had leaf springs at all 4 wheels. But that's then, and this is now. All right, now let us have a look at this amazing air suspension as we suspend the air. Now, as I look around, I will find our controller, and here it is. We are currently on normal. So let's take her up a notch. We're raising. Here we raise. Still raising. We are off-road setting 1. Let's go all the way to 2, shall we? Watch for clearance, and here we go. Raising. Raising. All done with the power of air. Amazing when you think about it. Ride height achieved. Off-road level 2. Now we'll go back down. We're lowering now. How long will it take us to get back down to normal? You think it's hard to say because all this air has to bleed off now in these airbags. And we're continuing to lower. Normal ride height achieved. Now we're going lower as we lower down. Now tell me, is it affecting the geometry? We are now at aero setting. And now we'll go down to, which I assume is called load setting. Lowering, lowering, lowering. And there we are, ride height achieved, entry exit ride height achieved. So there is our air suspension. Fascinating, fascinating thing. And as I take us back up, we shall go to normal now, which is where all things got started. and I will get out of this vehicle and find out whether or not my camera has been crushed. Here's something interesting. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? What we have here is your Hemi exhaust note on part of your something or other package on this Ram 1500. What I find really interesting about the exhaust is it almost has a diesel-like cadence to it, the way it sounds. But they've done all kinds of things to make it sound manly, mean, powerful, Thor-like in its resonance.
Whatever it is that you're offering, we're not into it. Don't care, couldn't care less. Goodbye.
Well, you see now, your Ram pickup trucks like to do things a little differently. Some people will like this. Some people will despise it. But right now, I'm having a conundrum, and maybe I'll figure this out. I'll have to contact Stellantis to get the actual word on this, but this vehicle, as I pointed out earlier, has the power side steps, but I still can't figure out how to make them go in and stay in. You have the control form is right here, and it's either in or out. And right now, they won't come out because I'm in drive, which is good. But if I'm parked and I'm going in and out of the truck doing all kinds of things, they keep opening and shutting the door. They open, close, open, close, open, close. So under those circumstances and a million others I can think of, where I don't want those side steps to deploy, there's no switch. There used to be a store mode on these things that would store them, and they don't deploy unless you tell them to. But I can't find that anywhere on this truck, and I've searched for 15 minutes trying to figure this out. Another thing that's interesting about this, couple of things. This is the only pickup I'm aware of on the market right now, full-size truck, that has their central display screen in a portrait fashion, similar to the way Volvo has a portrait fashion. And I believe Tesla, although, Elon Musk, enough said. But I find this a strange use of real estate. Now, and I much prefer, especially with maps, I just like it horizontal. And General Motors, Ford, Toyota, they all do it in a horizontal or a, what do they call that? One's landscape. That's it, landscape. But Stellantis chooses to do it this way. And, it also has another thing I don't like about it is you can turn the volume down or hit, I imagine there's a mute button somewhere. Wow, all I did is turn the wheel and it did that. How does that happen? Look at that. It's loading a map. All I did, as God and you are my witness, all I did was turn the wheel a little bit. Wow, that's really something. But if you want to mute, you just have to turn the radio all the way down. If you turn it off, that's what happens to the screen. The entire screen goes off. You can't just, most vehicles I test, normally if you turn off the radio goes off, but everything else stays up. Why they do that, I don't know. But then again, life is a mystery. So, our Ram. It sounds great with that V8 engine, which is so important to so many people. It's a real nice smooth transmission, an 8-speedy. It's also something that Rams have been for years now is very quiet. They do a great job with keeping the cab nice and quiet. It's fairly roomy. You'd have to be an enormous person not to feel comfortable in this truck, front seat or back. As I mentioned, I think before, the rear seat is pretty much limousine quality. The ride quality, like I said, I honestly can't tell a substantial difference. And in some ways, some people will think this is a smoother ride, but it's because the way it responds to bumps is different from a lot of the competition. It's like the new Tundra, if you compare it to the old Tundra, leaf springs in the back versus coil springs. I don't think the new one rides any smoother, but it rides different. You can definitely feel that it's different, but it still has that busy truck jiggle. Now, again, this one is kind of a special case because we do have the air suspension. And air suspensions are real interesting. They have their pluses and their minuses. The big minus is expense and complexity. The big advantage is they can, when they're adjusted right, have the right amount of air in the bags, they ride really nice. And this particular vehicle, of course, you can adjust the ride height, but if you really adjust the ride height a lot so that it's got the maximum amount of ground clearance, it also firms up the suspension. Now you would say, well, that makes perfect sense because I only need that extra ground clearance when I'm driving over boulders off-road, and that's when you want a nice stiff suspension, which is absolutely true. However, under certain circumstances, it harshens up the ride quite a bit. It's not bad on this truck. I've definitely driven worse that have had air suspensions. But like right now, the little imperfections in the road and stuff, you can feel it's at the normal setting. Sorry, right here. Normal setting for the air suspension. And it, to me, rides like every other full-size pickup. I see no difference whatsoever. Handling-wise, there's a standard of handling that they all have now, all the manufacturers. And they're all about the same. They all handle like big trucks. They handle light years better than the big trucks of 20 years ago. But, you know, you can't really say, oh, it handles as good as a car, or the steering is as responsive as a car. It's not, but it is. Steering feel is one of these things they've done so many good things with, and the weighting of the steering is so much better than it used to be. It's really nice on this truck, too. It feels good, it feels comfortable. A few other things, this particular $73,000 truck does not have adaptive cruise control, which surprises me. You expected that price point. God, I'm starting to talk like these other video people. The price point. You'd expect for this amount of money that it would have pretty much every bell and whistle, especially something like that where you'd have something to keep you in your lane and all that stuff. What it does have is a really elaborate trailer system as far as backing up the trailer, and you can steer the truck, take your hands off the steering wheel and use this knob right here. You want to turn to the right, turn to the back, the truck does everything for you. I haven't tested it with our horse trailer because our horse trailer hasn't been here. It's actually been Del Norte with horses in it. Well, actually, the horses are not in it right now. They're out frolicking in upstate New York. But so I don't really have a trailer I can test it with. But I'm one of these, as you've probably discovered now, I'm an old school curmudgeon. I feel like you really, if you have a trailer, you need to learn how to back it up. Find yourself a big empty parking lot with your trailer and you'll learn how to do it. It is a very bizarre thing initially if you've never backed up a big trailer, but over time you'll learn many things.
Now, if we could crossbreed a human with a roach, then we would have a species that could last for 10 billion years.
Well, there we are. You learn something every day. So don't forget to learn something every day. It's good for you. And this Ram, this is a nice truck. Maybe you should purchase one. Go look at one. It may be the truck for you.
Gesandt geworden, ist ein viel